"You don't belong in this cabin, and you certainly don't belong on my plane," Captain Brock O'Malley sneered, pointing a finger at the woman in seat 1A. He thought he was removing a disruptive passenger. He thought he was protecting the prestige of global sovereign airways. But what Captain O'Malley didn't know was that the woman he was humiliating wasn't just a passenger. She was Dr. Nia Patterson, the woman who had just bought the airline. And that pen in her hand. It wasn't for signing a customs form. It was for signing his termination papers. Watch until the end to see how arrogance costs a man his entire career in seconds. Rain lashed against the reinforced glass of JFK International Airport, turning the tarmac into a blurry watercolor of grey steel and flashing orange lights. Inside the climate-controlled exclusivity of the first-class cabin on Flight 902 to London, the air smelled of expensive leather and fresh orchids. Dr. Nia Patterson adjusted the cuff of her cream-colored cashmere sweater. She sat in seat 1A, the prime spot on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a seat usually reserved for diplomats, tech moguls, or royalty. Nia was none of those, at least not in the way the world expected. She was a forensic auditor and a corporate restructuring genius, known in Wall Street circles as the Scalpel. She pulled a leather-bound notebook from her bag. It was a chaotic week. Global Sovereign Airways was hemorrhaging money, and the board of directors had quietly brought her firm in to clean house. But today, she wasn't just the auditor. She was the newly appointed Chief Operations Officer, working incognito to test the service standards before the official announcement on Monday. "Champagne, ma'am?" Nia looked up. A flight attendant, whose name tag read Jessica, offered a warm, if slightly nervous, smile. Jessica held a tray with a crystal flute. "Water, please. Sparkling if you have it," Nia said softly. Her voice was melodic but firm. "Of course." Jessica moved to the galley. Nia returned to her notes. She was reviewing the pilot rosters. There had been complaints, internal HR grievances that had been buried by middle management, reports of a toxic cockpit culture, seniority abuse, and racial insensitivity. One name appeared frequently in the redacted files: Captain B. O'Malley. As if summoned by the thought, the cockpit door burst open. Captain Brock O'Malley stepped out. He was a man who took up space aggressively. He was tall, with silver fox hair that he clearly spent money maintaining, and a uniform that was pressed to razor-sharp perfection. He wore his 4 stripes like a crown. Brock was a legacy pilot, the kind who believed the golden age of aviation meant the era where he was a god, and everyone else was a servant. He scanned the first-class cabin, nodding with practiced charm at a businessman in 1F who was wearing a Patek Philippe watch. Brock's gaze swept across the cabin and landed on Seat 1A. He stopped. The charm evaporated. Nia felt the weight of his stare. She didn't look up immediately, finishing a sentence in her notebook. When she finally raised her eyes, she found Brock towering over her seat. "Excuse me," Brock said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand for attention. "Yes, Captain," Nia replied, keeping her face neutral. Brock didn't look at her face. He looked at her jeans, designer but distressed denim, and her sneakers. Then he looked at her hair, styled in intricate braids. He let out a short, derisive huff of air. "This is the first-class cabin," Brock said, his voice loud enough that the businessman in 1F lowered his newspaper. "I am aware of that," Nia said. "It's very comfortable." "I don't think you understand." Brock stepped closer, invading her personal space. "This cabin is for full-fare paying passengers, and elite status members. The staff jump seats are in the back, near the galley. If you're a deadheading flight attendant or a family member on a buddy pass, you need to move. Now. Nia blinked. The assumption was so lazy, so cliched. She almost laughed. Almost. I'm not deadheading, Captain, and I'm certainly not on a buddy pass. I have a ticket for this seat. Brock crossed his arms. Let me see it. I've already shown my boarding pass to the gate agent and the flight attendant, Nia said, her voice cooling by several degrees. I'm settled. And I'm the captain of this vessel, Brock snapped, which means I am the ultimate authority on who sits where. We have a wait list of high-value clients for these seats. If you snuck up here from economy, or if there was a computer glitch that put you here, I need to rectify it. Show me the ticket, or I'll have security escort you off. Jessica, the flight attendant, hurried over, looking terrified. Captain O'Malley, she's on the manifest. I checked. Quiet, Jessica. Brock barked without looking at her. I know how these system errors work. They oversell economy and bump people up based on random algorithms. But we have a platinum member in 4A who deserves this seat more than... He gestured vaguely at Nia, his hand waving dismissively. More than a tourist. Nia closed her notebook. The sound was a soft thud, but in the sudden silence of the cabin, it sounded like a gavel drop. Captain, Nia said, standing up. She was shorter than him, but she held herself with a posture that made her seem formidable. My ticket was not an upgrade. It was purchased full fare. And I suggest you return to the cockpit and focus on the pre-flight checklist. We are already 10 minutes behind schedule. Brock's face turned a shade of crimson. He wasn't used to being told what to do, certainly not by a woman, and definitely not by a black woman in sneakers. Is that right? Brock stepped back, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. You want to talk about schedules? Fine. This plane isn't moving an inch until you are out of that seat. I don't trust your presence here. You fit the profile of a security risk. The businessman in 1F gasped. Now, hold on. That's a bit much, he muttered, though he didn't stand up to intervene. A security risk? Nia repeated, her voice dangerous now. Because I'm sitting in a seat I paid for? Because you're belligerent and refusing a direct order from the pilot in command, Brock lied smoothly. He reached for the interphone on the wall. I'm calling the gate agents. You're getting bumped to economy. Row 45, right by the toilets. That's where you belong. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from awkward to hostile in seconds. Brock O'Malley held the interphone receiver like a weapon, his eyes locked on Nia, daring her to make a scene. He wanted her to scream. He wanted her to get ghetto, as he would later joke to his co-pilot, so he could justify removing her entirely. But Nia didn't scream. She sat back down, crossed her legs, and pulled out her phone. Go ahead, Captain, she said, unlocking her screen. Call the gate agent. In fact, call the station manager. I'd love to speak with him. Brock scoffed into the receiver. Gate, this is the flight deck. I have a disruptive passenger in 1A who is refusing to vacate a seat assigned in error. I need 2 agents on board immediately to assist with relocation. He hung up and smirked at Nia. You have about 3 minutes to gather your little bags before they drag you back there. If I were you, I'd move voluntarily. It's less embarrassing. Nor ignored him. She was typing a message on a secure enterprise app. Recipient, Arthur Pendleton, CEO Global Sovereign Airways. Message, code red at JFK, flight 902, Captain O'Malley. Verify my clearance immediately. Do not call me, just watch the system. She hit send. Jessica, the flight attendant, leaned in close to Nia, whispering, "Mom, I am so sorry. He's having a bad day. Look, there's a nice seat in premium economy, row 12. It has extra leg room. Maybe just to keep the peace." Nia looked at Jessica with sympathy. She knew what it was like to work under a tyrant. "Jessica, you're doing a good job, but I'm not moving. This isn't about the seat anymore." Two gate agents, wearing high-visibility vests over their suits, rushed onto the plane. They looked flushed and stressed. The lead agent, a man named Kevin, looked at the captain and then at Nia. "What's the problem, Captain?" Kevin asked. "She's in the wrong seat," Brock pointed. "And she's being aggressive. I want her moved to 45C. Move Mr. Henderson from 4A up here." Kevin looked at his tablet. He tapped the screen, frowned, tapped it again. "Captain, the manifest shows Dr. Nia Patterson in 1A. Full fare. Paid by corporate card?" Kevin looked confused. "It's a priority code booking. Top tier." Brock grabbed the tablet from Kevin's hands. "Don't be an idiot, Kevin. Look at her." He gestured to Nia, who was calmly sipping the water Jessica had brought her. "Does she look like a corporate priority to you? It's a system glitch. The system probably confused her with someone else. Just move her." "Captain," Nia spoke up, her voice cutting through the noise. "If you move me, you will be violating federal aviation regulation regarding passenger discrimination, and you will be breaching the contract of carriage. I suggest you check your iPad, not the manifest. Check your company email." Brock laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "My email? You think you're important enough to be in my inbox? Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you're about to be on the no-fly list." He turned to Kevin. "Get her off. Now. Or I don't fly. You tell the tower we are delayed due to a security threat." Kevin looked at Nia, pleadingly. "Mom, please. The captain is the ultimate authority on the plane. If he refuses to fly, then he refuses to fly." Nia finished the sentence. She stood up again, picking up her phone. "Kevin, is it? I'd like you to read a notification that should be popping up on your scanner right about now." Kevin's scanner beeped, a loud, urgent trill that indicated a message from headquarters. He looked down. His eyes went wide. He looked at Nia, then back at the screen, then at the captain. The color drained from his face. "Captain," Kevin said, his voice trembling, "we have a do-not-move order." "What?" Brock snapped. "It's from the CEO's office," Kevin stammered. "Direct from Arthur Pendleton. It says, 'The passenger in 1A is to be accorded all courtesies. Any staff member interfering with her transit will be subject to immediate disciplinary review.'" The cabin went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Brock snatched the scanner from Kevin. He read the text. His jaw tightened, the muscles working furiously. He looked at Nia, confusion warring with his ego. He couldn't process it. In his mind, she was nobody. This had to be a trick. She probably knew someone in IT. "This is fake," Brock muttered. "You hacked the system." "Captain O'Malley," Nia said, stepping into the aisle so she was toe-to-toe with him. "I didn't hack the system. I audit the system, and right now, I'm auditing you." Brock's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "I'm the person who is going to decide if you keep those wings," Nia said. "Now, are we going to London, or do we need to continue this conversation at the gate?" Brock stared at her. The ego was still there, fighting for survival. He couldn't back down, Not in front of the crew, not in front of the passengers. He leaned in, his voice a low growl meant only for her. You might have friends in high places, sweetheart. But once those doors close, you're in my sky. And it's going to be a very bumpy ride for you. I'll make sure the seatbelt sign stays on for 8 hours. You won't even be able to use the bathroom. He straightened up, adjusted his tie, and turned to Kevin. She stays. But file a report. I want it noted she was hostile. Brock spun on his heel and marched back into the cockpit, slamming the reinforced door so hard the frame rattled. Naya sat down. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. He had just threatened her safety and comfort. He had doubled down. She opened her notebook again. She turned to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, Termination Protocol. But the drama was far from over. Brock O'Malley was a petty man, and a petty man with control over a 200-ton aircraft was a dangerous thing. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Naya felt a vibration in her pocket. Another text from Arthur Pendleton. Arthur, Nia, I can pull him off the flight now. Say the word. Nia looked at the cockpit door. If she pulled him now, the flight would be cancelled. Hundreds of people would miss connections. The airline would lose thousands. She was an executive. She had to think about the bottom line. Nia, no. Let him fly. I want to see how he handles the pressure. But have a replacement crew waiting at Heathrow, and have legal ready. The engines roared to life. Nia looked out the window as the plane taxied. She knew Brock was up there, likely fuming, likely planning his petty revenge. He had no idea that he had just locked himself in a metal tube with his executioner. The Boeing 787 leveled off at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, gliding over the Atlantic like a silver dart. To the untrained eye, everything was normal. The engines hummed with a reassuring drone, and the cabin lights in first class dimmed to a relaxing twilight hue. But inside the metal tube, a silent war was being waged. Nia Patterson sat in seat 1A, shivering. 20 minutes into the flight, the temperature in the first-class cabin had plummeted. It wasn't just a little chilly, it was refrigerator cold. Nia pulled her cashmere sweater tighter around herself, but the cold air seemed to be blasting directly from the vent above her seat, a vent that she couldn't close. She pressed the call button. Jessica appeared almost instantly, her face pale. She carried a heavy wool blanket, but she held it close to her chest, hesitating before handing it over. Here, Dr. Patterson, Jessica whispered, glancing nervously toward the front galley and the cockpit door beyond. I brought you two. It's freezing in here. Thank you, Jessica, Nia said, taking the blankets. Is there an issue with the environmental control system? It feels like the AC is set to meat locker. Jessica bit her lip. She crouched down, dropping her voice to a barely audible murmur. It's not the system. It's him. Captain O'Malley has manual control over the zone temperatures. He set Zone A, your zone, to the minimum. The rest of the plane is 72 degrees. You're at 60. Nia's jaw tightened. It was petty. It was childish. It was physical abuse, masked as a technical quirk. Can you reset it from the flight attendant panel? I tried, Jessica said, her eyes watering. He locked us out. He called the galley and said if I touched the thermostat again, he'd write me up for interfering with flight deck operations. He said he needs to keep the front alert for security reasons. Security reasons, Nia repeated, the absurdity of it settling in. He's freezing me out. He also instructed us that the seatbelt sign will remain on for the duration of the turbulence, Jessica added, wringing her hands. There is no turbulence, Jessica. Look at my water glass. Nea pointed to the tray table. The water in her glass was perfectly still. I know, Jessica said, miserably, but as long as that light is on, I can't serve hot meals, I can't serve drinks, and you can't get up to use the restroom. He knows that. Nea looked at the illuminated fasten seatbelt sign above her head. It glared at her like a red eye. Brock O'Malley was using the Federal Aviation Administration's safety protocols as a personal torture device. He was banking on the fact that passengers rarely questioned the pilot's judgment on safety. Go back to the galley, Jessica, Naya said gently. Don't put yourself in the line of fire. I'll handle this. But you're hungry. It's an 8-hour flight. I'll survive. Just bring me a bottle of water when you can do so safely. As Jessica retreated, Naya pulled out her laptop. She connected to the onboard Wi-Fi, Global Sovereign's own satellite network. The connection was fast. She logged into the company's back-end server, using her administrative credentials. She wasn't just checking emails anymore. She was accessing the Aircraft Health Management System, AHMS. The screen filled with data streams. She navigated to the environmental controls log for Flight 902. There it was, stamped in digital code, manual override, cockpit source, Zone A target, temp 60 degrees, user, Capt B, O'Malley. He had left a digital fingerprint. Nea took a screenshot. Then she opened a new document titled Termination Cause, Gross Misconduct and Abuse of Authority, Flight 902. She began to type. She documented the temperature. She documented the seatbelt sign status against the accelerometer data of the plane, which showed smooth air. She was building a case that was airtight. An hour later, the intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Brock's voice boomed through the cabin, dripping with fake concern. We are experiencing some unexpected instability in the airflow up here. Nothing to worry about. But for the safety of the cabin, I'm going to need everyone to remain seated with seatbelts fastened. I've also instructed the crew to suspend meal service for the first-class cabin specifically, as the galley equipment there poses a safety hazard during this chop. Nea looked around. The businessman in 1F looked annoyed, tapping his empty glass. The couple in row 2 were whispering, confused by the lack of bumps. However, Brock continued, the economy and premium cabins are unaffected by this localized chop, so service will continue there. Sorry for the inconvenience to our elite flyers. Safety first. It was a master class in gaslighting. He was turning the other first-class passengers against the situation, creating an environment of frustration, knowing they would blame the turbulence, or the airline, not him. But the specific exclusion of first class was a direct strike at Nea. Nea didn't react. She didn't ring the call bell. She didn't storm the cockpit. She simply navigated to the HR portal. She pulled up Brock O'Malley's file. It was thick. 1998, hired. 2005, promoted to captain. 2012, sexual harassment complaint, settled at NDA. 2018, complaint of verbal abuse from co-pilot, dismissed. 2023, racial sensitivity training, mandated incomplete. He's a dinosaur, Nea whispered to herself, and he thinks he's an apex predator. 3 hours passed. Nea's legs were cramping. Her bladder was full. The cold was seeping into her bones. She wrapped the second blanket around her legs. Suddenly, the plane banked sharply to the left, then corrected aggressively. A few passengers gasped. The intercom clicked. "Whoops," Brock said. his voice casual, unprofessional. "Little air pocket there. Everyone stay buckled, especially seat 1A. We wouldn't want anyone getting hurt." Nia looked at the flight path on her screen. There was no air pocket. That was a manual input. He had jerked the yoke just to unsettle her. She opened the chat window with Arthur Pendleton again. "Nia, he is using the aircraft as a weapon of intimidation. He is inducing artificial yaw to frighten passengers. This is no longer just a personnel issue. It is a safety violation. Arthur, I have the London station manager, Sarah Jenkins, waiting at the gate. I have local police on standby. Do you want them to board?" Nia, "No police yet. I want corporate security. And I want the chief pilot of the European division. I want him to see who takes his stripes." The rest of the flight was a test of endurance. Nia didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She monitored the data, saving every erratic control input, every temperature fluctuation, every petty PA announcement. Brock O'Malley was digging his own grave with every mile they flew, and he was too arrogant to realize the woman in 1A wasn't a victim. She was a stenographer for his career's funeral. The descent into London Heathrow was rough. Brock flew the approach fast and hard, slamming the landing gear onto the tarmac with a violence that shook the overhead bins. It wasn't a crash, but it was an amateurish, aggressive landing, a final screw you to the passengers he held in contempt. "Welcome to London," Brock announced as they taxied. "Local time is 7 a.m. We are arriving at Gate 42. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off. And for the passenger in 1A, please remain on board until all other passengers have deplaned. Security needs to have a word with you." The businessman in 1F looked at Nia with a mix of pity and suspicion. "What did you do?" he whispered. Nia unbuckled her seatbelt the moment the chime dinged. She stood up, folding her blanket neatly. "I did my job," she said calmly, "and now I'm going to finish it." The cabin door opened. The cool, damp air of London rushed in. Usually the first-class passengers left first, but Jessica stood at the front of the aisle, looking apologetic, blocking the way. "I'm sorry," Jessica announced to the cabin. "Captain's orders. We have to hold the cabin for a moment." Brock O'Malley emerged from the cockpit. He had put his hat on, adjusting the brim. He looked energized, high on the adrenaline of his own power trip. He walked into the first-class cabin, ignoring the grumbles of the other passengers, and stopped in front of Nia. "Well," Brock smirked, looking down at her. "Hope you enjoyed the ride. I told you it would be bumpy." "It was informative," Nia said, picking up her bag. "You can leave your bag," Brock said. "The police will want to search it. I've flagged you as a disruptive passenger. You refused crew instructions, you were hostile, and you endangered the flight." He pointed to the open door of the aircraft. Two large men in dark suits were standing on the jet bridge, waiting. Beside them was a woman with a clipboard and a severe expression. "See them?" Brock chuckled. "That's not the welcome wagon. That's security. You're done flying with us. You're done flying with anyone." Brock turned to the passengers. "Folks, sorry for the delay. We had to ensure the authorities were here to remove a problem passenger. You can go now." He gestured for the businessman in 1F to pass, but Nia stepped into the aisle, blocking the exit. "Move," Brock snapped. "No," Nia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a resonance that stopped everyone. "No one is leaving yet, because we need to clarify who the security risk actually is. Brock's face went red. "I am the captain." "Not anymore." Naya cut him off. She reached into her bag. Brock flinched, perhaps expecting a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope she had prepared during the flight, printed on her portable thermal printer she carried for contracts. She walked past Brock, forcing him to press himself against the galley wall to avoid touching her. She stepped out onto the jet bridge. "Officers!" Brock yelled to the men in suits. "That's her! Grab her!" The two men in dark suits stepped forward. Brock followed Naya out, a smug grin on his face, waiting to see her handcuffed. But the men didn't grab Nia. They walked past her. They walked directly up to Captain Brock O'Malley. "Captain O'Malley?" one of the men asked. He was built like a tank, with an earpiece coiling down his neck. "Yes, I'm the captain. Detain that woman," Brock demanded, pointing a shaking finger at Naya. The man ignored the finger. "I'm head of corporate security for Global Sovereign Airways, Europe Division. This is Sarah Jenkins, station manager. And this," he gestured to a tall, grey-haired man in a pilot's uniform who had just stepped out from behind the door, "is Chief Pilot Anderson." Brock froze. The chief pilot? Here? Sarah Jenkins stepped forward. She didn't look at Brock. She looked at Naya. "Dr. Patterson," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly with respect. "Welcome to London. I apologize for the irregularities on your flight." Brock's brain stalled. "Dr. Patterson." Nia turned around to face Brock. The wind from the tarmac blew her braids back, revealing her face fully. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp as diamonds. "Captain O'Malley," Naya said, her voice carrying over the sound of the jet engines nearby. "You seem confused. Let me introduce myself properly. I am Dr. Naya Patterson. I am the new Chief Operations Officer of Global Sovereign Airways. And as of last week, I am the majority shareholder." The blood drained from Brock's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. You own," he stammered. "I own the plane," Naya said, tapping the fuselage of the Dreamliner. "I own the seat you wouldn't let me sit in. I own the fuel you wasted on your ego trip. And unfortunately for you, I own your contract." She held out the envelope. "What is this?" Brock whispered. "It's a notification of immediate termination, for cause," Naya said calmly. "Gross misconduct, endangering passengers, harassment, willful violation of Title 14 CFR regarding safe operation of an aircraft, and personally for being a bigot." Brock stared at the envelope. He didn't take it. "You can't do this," he sputtered, his voice rising in panic. "I have a union. I have seniority. You can't fire me on the tarmac. I've flown for 30 years. "And you won't fly for 30 more seconds," Naya said. She turned to the chief pilot. "Captain Anderson, please escort Mr. O'Malley to the crew lounge to retrieve his personal effects. Strip him of his credentials immediately. He is not to access any secure areas." "Understood, Dr. Patterson," Chief Pilot Anderson said. He looked at Brock with disdain. "Hand over your badge, Brock, and your epaulets." My epaulets!" Brock clutched his shoulder stripes. "You disgraced the uniform," Anderson said. "Take them off, or security will take them off for you." The passengers from first class were now crowding the doorway, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. The businessman from 1F had his phone out, recording everything. Jessica, the flight attendant, stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears of relief in her eyes. Brock looked around, desperate for an ally. "First Officer Davis!" he yelled into the plane. "Back me up! Tell them she was disruptive." First Officer Davis appeared in the doorway. He looked at Naya, then at the terrified Brock. "The passenger was quiet and compliant, sir," Davis said, his voice steady. "You created the hostile environment. I've already filed my report via the ACARS system during the flight." "You traitor!" Brock lunged toward the plane. The two security guards moved with lightning speed. They intercepted Brock, grabbing him by the arms. One of them expertly twisted his arm behind his back. "Let go of me! Do you know who I am?" Brock screamed, thrashing as they dragged him away from the plane, away from the first-class cabin, away from the career he had just incinerated. Nia watched him go. She didn't smile. It wasn't funny. It was tragic that a man would throw away a life's work just because he couldn't stand to see a black woman in a position of power. She turned to Sarah Jenkins. "Sarah, please ensure the rest of the crew is taken care of. They were under duress. And give Jessica, the flight attendant in first, a week of paid leave." She tried to protect the passengers. "Yes, Dr. Patterson, immediately." Nia turned to leave, but the businessman from 1F cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said. "Dr. Patterson?" Nia paused. "Yes." "That was—" He paused, looking at the empty jet bridge where Brock had been dragged away. "That was the most satisfying thing I have ever witnessed. I think I'm going to fly this airline exclusively from now on." Nia finally allowed herself a small smile. "We're making some changes, sir. Welcome to the new global sovereign." She walked up the jet bridge, the termination papers still in her hand. She hadn't even needed to open them. The look on his face had been signature enough. But the story wasn't over. Brock O'Malley wasn't the type to go quietly. He was about to make the mistake of taking this to court, and Nia Patterson was about to show him that the scalpel didn't just cut. She dissected. 3 months had passed since the incident on the tarmac at Heathrow. The story had circulated as a rumor in aviation forums. The captain who fired his boss. But the details remained murky. Global Sovereign Airways had moved on, its stock price rising under Dr. Nia Patterson's ruthless efficiency. But Brock O'Malley had not moved on. Brock was a man fueled by grievance. In his mind, he was the victim of a woke corporate conspiracy. He believed Nia had baited him, entrapped him, and humiliated him to score political points. He couldn't find work. No major airline would touch a pilot fired for cause with gross misconduct on his PRIA, Pilot Records Improvement Act, file. So, Brock did the only thing his ego would allow. He sued. The lawsuit was filed in the Southern District of New York. O'Malley vs. Global Sovereign Airways and Nia Patterson. He was asking for $20 million in damages for wrongful termination, defamation, and emotional distress. The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room in Manhattan. Nia sat at the head of the long mahogany table. She wore a sharp navy blazer, her expression unreadable. Beside her was her general counsel, a shark of a lawyer named Preston Gage. Across from them sat Brock. He looked older. The Silver Fox charm had curdled into something brittle. His suit was expensive, but it fit poorly, as if he had lost weight from stress. Next to him was his attorney, Clifford Baines, a man known for taking high-profile employment discrimination cases and turning them into media circuses. "Dr. Patterson," Clifford Baines began, clicking a gold pen. "Let's revisit the events of Flight 902. You claim my client was hostile. Yet isn't it true that you refused to show your physical ticket when asked by the captain?" "I showed my boarding pass to the gate agent and the lead flight attendant," Naya replied calmly. The captain did not ask for my ticket. He demanded I move to the back of the plane because he assumed I didn't belong in first class. An assumption based on safety protocols, Baines countered smoothly. Captain O'Malley identified a passenger who did not fit the profile of the manifest. He was exercising his right to secure the cockpit. You, however, chose to escalate. You used your position as an executive, a position my client was unaware of, to intimidate him. Brock leaned forward, a sneer forming. "She set me up," he interrupted. "She sat there with that notebook, taking notes like a spy. If she had just told me who she was, none of this would have happened." "So you admit," Naya said, turning her gaze directly to Brock, "that you treat passengers differently based on who you think they are." "I treat threats differently." Brock slammed his hand on the table. "You were an anomaly, a disruption, and then you hacked the system to send that fake "do not move" order." Preston Gage, Naya's lawyer, cleared his throat. "We have already established that the order came directly from the CEO, Mr. O'Malley. There was no hacking." "I don't believe it," Brock spat. "And I don't believe the data you submitted about the flight controls. I've been flying for 30 years. I know how to handle a plane. I didn't endanger anyone. That turbulence was real." Nia reached into her briefcase. She didn't pull out a paper document this time. She pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. "Mr. Baines," Nia said to the opposing lawyer, "your entire case rests on the premise that Captain O'Malley acted within the scope of his duties to ensure safety, and that any discomfort I experienced was due to atmospheric conditions." "Correct," Baines said, eyeing the hard drive warily. "And," Naya continued, "Captain O'Malley has sworn in his affidavit that he never manually tampered with the environmental controls to freeze the cabin." "I never touched them," Brock lied. "The sensor was faulty. It happens on Dreamliners all the time." Nia plugged the drive into the conference room's projection system. A large screen descended from the ceiling. "This," Naya said, "is the black box telemetry data, not the summary report, the raw second-by-second inputs." A graph appeared on the screen. It showed a flat red line representing the temperature in Zone A. Then, at 10:14 a.m., the line dropped vertically. "Here," Naya pointed with a laser pointer. "Command input, source cockpit, override, target 60 degrees. She fast-forwarded the data. "And here, 1:30 p.m., the aircraft is in stable air. The accelerometer reads 0.0 G variance. Perfectly smooth. Yet here is a command input from the pilot flying station. Rudder input, left 15 degrees. Aileron input, right 10 degrees. Nia looked at Brock. "That's a cross-control maneuver, Mr. O'Malley. It's used to induce a slip. You deliberately made the plane yaw to simulate turbulence. You used a 200-ton aircraft to bully a passenger." The room went silent. Baines, the lawyer, stopped clicking his pen. He looked at the screen, then at his client. That could be a sensor error," Brock stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "The computer logs can be manipulated." "They can't," Naya said. "But even if they could, they are corroborated." She clicked the next file. It was an audio file. "We recovered the cockpit voice recorder data," Naya said. "Usually this is overwritten every 2 hours. But because Flight 902 was flagged as a security incident immediately upon landing, the data was preserved by the British authorities before you could wipe it." She pressed play. Static. Brock's voice, tinny but clear. "Look at her, sitting there like she owns the place. I'm going to freeze her out." Watch this. Sound of switches clicking. First Officer Davis. Captain, is that necessary? The cabin temp is... Brock. Shut up, Davis. She wants to be a princess. She can be a frozen one. And keep that seatbelt sign on. I don't want her getting up. If she wets herself, that's her problem. Laughter from Brock. Nia stopped the recording. The silence in the conference room was heavy, suffocating. Brock O'Malley had turned a ghostly shade of grey. His lawyer, Clifford Baines, slowly closed his folder. Mr. O'Malley, Baines said, his voice icy. You told me there was no recording. I thought the loop would erase it, Brock whispered, his voice trembling. Nia stood up. She looked like a giant, even though she was just 5'6". We are countersuing, Mr. O'Malley, Nia said, for the cost of the fuel you wasted, for the reputational damage to the airline, and for the legal fees. We will bankrupt you, or... She slid a single piece of paper across the table. You drop the lawsuit. You surrender your pilot's license voluntarily to the FAA to avoid a public hearing. And you sign this NDA admitting to everything. If you do that, I won't release this audio to the press. Brock looked at the paper. It was his surrender. It was the end of his life as a pilot. But the alternative was public destruction and financial ruin. Brock's voice broke. I was a good pilot. No, Nia said softly. You were a skilled operator of machinery, but you were a terrible pilot, because a pilot is responsible for every soul on board, and you decided one of those souls didn't matter. Brock signed the paper with a shaking hand. Nia took the document, nodded to Preston, and walked out. She had won the legal battle, but she had underestimated just how much the internet loved a villain. Nia had promised not to release the audio if Brock went away quietly, and legally, she kept her word. The audio remained in the vault at Global Sovereign HQ. But Nia couldn't control the passengers. 3 days after the settlement, a video appeared on Reddit. It wasn't from the cockpit. It was from Seat 1F. The businessman, Mr. Henderson, had been recording on his phone during the confrontation at the gate in London. He had captured the entire exchange. Brock's arrogance, his demand to have Nia arrested, and the glorious moment Nia revealed her identity. The video was titled, Racist Pilot Tries to Kick Off Black Woman, Finds Out She Owns the Airline. It hit the front page in 4 hours. It had 2 million views in 12 hours. By the next morning, it was on Good Morning America. The internet exploded. The comment section was a bonfire of righteous indignation. User 123, the way he pointed his finger at her, my blood is boiling. Fly girl, I'm a flight attendant. This happens way more than you think. God bless this woman for standing her ground. Karma Police. The look on his face when she said, I own the plane, needs to be in the Louvre. But the internet didn't just watch, it dug. Internet sleuths identified Brock O'Malley within hours. They found his old Facebook posts, which were filled with questionable rants about diversity hires ruining aviation. They found his yearbook photos. They found his address. Brock, who was sitting at home trying to figure out how to live on a pension that was now under threat, found his front lawn filled with news vans. He made a fatal mistake. Instead of hiding, he decided to fight back in the court of public opinion. He thought he could charm the public, like he used to charm the flight attendants. He accepted an interview with a controversial, right-leaning podcast host named Gunther Reed, known for anti-woke Commentary. The interview was live-streamed. "So, Brock," Gunther asked, leaning into his microphone, "tell us the real story. This woman, this diversity executive, she baited you, right?" "Absolutely, Gunther," Brock said, wearing a polo shirt that was too tight. He tried to look relaxed, but his eyes were darting nervously. "She refused to follow orders. In the air, the captain is God. If I say sit, you sit. She challenged my authority. I was just trying to keep the plane safe. Now I've lost my license because of political correctness." "It's a tragedy," Gunther nodded. A veteran pilot cancelled by the mob. Suddenly, the chat on the live stream began to spam a link. Thousands of people were posting the same link. "What's this?" Gunther squinted at his monitor. "My producers are telling me there's another video." It wasn't a video from Naya. It was from a former co-pilot. First Officer Davis, the man who had sat beside Brock during that flight, had broken his silence. He posted a video on TikTok. Davis looked into the camera, looking exhausted, but determined. "Hi, I'm First Officer Davis. I was the co-pilot on Flight 902. I've seen Brock O'Malley on the news playing the victim. I can't stay quiet anymore. I'm risking my career by saying this, but the public needs to know." Davis held up his flight log. "Brock didn't care about safety. He spent the first 2 hours of the flight bragging about how he was going to make Dr. Patterson beg for a blanket. He manually dropped the temperature. He jerked the controls to scare her. He called her names I won't repeat here. He wasn't protecting the plane. He was using it as a torture chamber. He is a disgrace to the uniform." Gunther Reed watched the clip live on air. His face fell. Even he, a shock jock, knew a sinking ship when he saw one. "Well," Gunther stammered, That's a strong accusation." Brock's face turned purple. "Davis is a liar. He's a weak pilot. He's jealous of my record." But it was over. The chat turned on him instantly. The hero-victim narrative collapsed in seconds. Comment: Davis just ended this man's whole life. Comment: Brock is lying. You can see it in his eyes. Comment: Imagine freezing a woman for 8 hours because she sat in first class. Monster. Global Sovereign Airways released a brief statement on Twitter X moments later. Global Sovereign Airways stands by our decision to terminate Mr. O'Malley for gross misconduct. We commend First Officer Davis for his integrity. Safety and respect are our core values. We are moving forward. Brock stormed out of the podcast studio, but the cameras were waiting outside. He tried to cover his face, but the image was captured. Brock O'Malley, alone, disgraced, running from the consequences of his own arrogance. Back in her office, high above the city skyline, Naya watched the footage on her iPad. She felt no joy, only a quiet sense of closure. She turned off the screen. "Arthur," she called to the CEO on the intercom. "Yes, Nia. Let's promote Davis to captain. He's ready." "Done." Nia picked up her fountain pen, the same one Brock had mocked. She had contracts to sign. She had an airline to run. The turbulence was finally over. 2 years had passed since the termination of Captain Brock O'Malley. The aviation world, once slow to change, had shifted on its axis. Global Sovereign Airways was now the industry leader in customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. The stock had doubled, but the biggest change wasn't on the balance sheet. It was in the cockpit. Dr. Naya Patterson stood on the observation deck of the new Patterson Aviation Academy in Atlanta. She was watching a graduation ceremony. Below her, 50 new cadets stood in pristine uniforms, their gold wings glinting in the sun. They were a diverse group, men and women from every background, every race, every economic tier. They were the best of the best, handpicked not for their lineage, but for their skill. Standing next to Naya was Captain Davis, formerly First Officer Davis. He now wore 4 stripes. He had been the first to testify against Brock, and his bravery had paved the way for a culture of accountability. "They look ready," Davis said, smiling. "They are," Naya replied. "They know that the stripes on their shoulders aren't a crown, they're a responsibility." Naya's phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah Jenkins in London. "Sarah, you'll never guess who I just saw at the Stansted budget parking lot." Nia raised an eyebrow. Stansted was a smaller airport, mostly for low-cost carriers and cargo. The parking lots there were notorious for being muddy, cold, and miles away from the terminal. Nia. "Who?" "Sarah. Sent you a photo." Nia opened the image. At first, she didn't recognize the man. He was hunched over, wearing a neon yellow vest over a stained grey parka. He looked 10 years older. His silver hair was thinning and unkempt. He was dragging a heavy suitcase out of the mud, loading it into the back of a rusted shuttle bus. It was Brock O'Malley. Brock wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of a greasy glove. It was raining again. Cold, miserable English rain. "Hey driver, move it!" a tourist shouted from inside the shuttle bus. "We're gonna miss our flight." "I'm going as fast as I can," Brock muttered, hefting another heavy bag. His back screamed in protest. He had no health care, no pension, and no union to protect him. After the viral video and the lawsuit, Brock had lost everything. His wife had left him, taking half of what remained of his savings. The legal fees had taken the rest. No airline would hire him, not even the cargo runners flying rubber dog vomit out of Hong Kong. He was blacklisted globally. He had been forced to sell his house, his boat, and his sports car. Now he lived in a small, damp studio apartment near the industrial park. His job was driving the Green Zone parking shuttle, a minimum wage gig where he spent 12 hours a day hauling luggage for people going on cheap holidays. He climbed into the driver's seat of the shuttle. The heater was broken. It was freezing, ironically, about 60 degrees, the same temperature he had forced Naya to endure. He put the bus in gear. As he drove toward the terminal, he looked in the rearview mirror. He saw a young black woman sitting in the front seat, reading a textbook on aerodynamics. She looked focused, intelligent, and hopeful. "You studying to be a pilot?" Brock asked, his voice raspy. The woman looked up. "Yes, sir. I just got accepted into the Global Sovereign Cadet Program, the Patterson Scholarship." Brock flinched at the name. Patterson. "Good for you," he whispered, a lump forming in his throat. "Yeah," the woman smiled. "It's an amazing program. The CEO, Dr. Patterson, she really changed the industry. She proved that it doesn't matter who you are, as long as you can fly the plane. Do you follow aviation?" Brock gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He looked at the runway in the distance, watching a global sovereign dreamliner soar into the clouds, majestic and unreachable. "I used to," Brock said quietly. "I used to be a pilot." "Really?" The woman looked impressed. "What happened? Why did you stop?" Brock looked at his reflection in the glass, tired, broken, and defeated. He thought about the lie he could tell. Medical issues. Retired. But for the first time in his life, the weight of his own arrogance crushed him. "I didn't respect the seat," Brock said, his voice hollow. "I thought I was a god. Turned out, I was just a driver." He pulled the bus up to the curb. "Terminal drop-off. Everyone out." As the passengers filed out, ignoring him, Brock sat alone in the cold bus. He watched the young woman walk toward the terminal, toward a future he had thrown away. The rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the world into grey tears. He was exactly where he deserved to be, grounded, while the world flew on without him. Brock O'Malley learned the hard way that stripes on a shoulder don't make you a leader, and sitting in the cockpit doesn't make you a god. He tried to freeze Dr. Patterson out, but in the end, he was the one left out in the cold. Dr. Nia Patterson continues to run Global Sovereign Airways today. Under her leadership, the company has the most diverse flight deck in the industry, and safety incidents have dropped by 40%. She proved that true power isn't about humiliating others. It's about lifting them up. This story serves as a reminder to everyone, no matter your job title. Treat people with respect. You never know who you're talking to. The person you insult today might be the one signing your paycheck or your termination papers tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think? Did Brock deserve his fate, or was the punishment too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about karma, revenge, and underdog victories, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.